Welcome back to Chapter Chats. In this episode, we're going to be diving into Chapter 7 of Chuck's 5th edition of ISD from the Ground Up, a no-nonsense approach to instructional design. This chapter, Development and Learning Management Systems, explores the pivotal development phase of ISD, where design ideas are transformed into tangible learning experiences. So let's get started. Chuck, my first question for you is, the development phase in ISD is where the ideas come to life. What would you say are some of the key elements of this phase, and how do they contribute to creating impactful learning experiences?
Well, that's quite a question. And as you're reading this chapter, as you're studying through this, just remember that this is where, as Denise said, things come to life. This is where you take all your design, your lesson plan approaches, your design plans, all the stuff that you've done to this point, and you turn it into a product. And I think people outside the ISD world are rather assumptive about this and don't even think about this as a separate element. They just do it naturally. And sometimes this is all they do is development. They put together a slide deck. Okay, that's terrific. Thank you very much. But that's what they do. So development, this whole idea of, okay, let's turn this plan into something tangible. And this has changed. If you think about it, I mean, it was a different world when we were all sitting in the classroom. And now that we have online, we got social media, we got micro-learning, we got all these things. So development takes this whole different turn. And yes, many courses and many offerings in learning design are still slide decks and an outline. That's okay. That works. But that's a smaller and smaller piece. It's still a majority, but is getting very much challenged by these other things. And in development, this is where that takes place.
Yeah. Look and feel is an important aspect of the development phase. Why should designers prioritize it, and how does it influence learner engagement and outcomes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So look and feel, sometimes you think about it, sometimes you don't. You know, what's the quality of the product? We think about look and feel all the time on this channel. And thankfully, we have somebody like Denise that actually knows what she's doing. If it was me with an iPhone, I don't know what we'd have. But so it takes some experience and expertise to be able to do these things. But the notion is, okay, what are we really trying to accomplish? And look and feel. And I learned this lesson completely outside of instructional design. So for many years, I was a member of IATSE. And these are the people that do motion pictures and television shows. These are the technicians, the camera people, the audio people, the gappers, all those folks that put together a product that's supposed to be pleasing to the eye, and almost always is if it's done professionally. And the one thing that I constantly heard from these professionals was it has to look good. It has to feel the way you want it to feel. If you can't grab them visually, then your chances of getting anything much further are certainly pushed back and maybe made more difficult. So once again, as a subject matter expert in something else, I learned all about ISD. And if you think about it, this is one of the more important things you do. Make it look good. Make it look in a way that's appealing to your population. And sometimes it's very simple. Like, we don't fancy things up on here because we're just having conversations. But we have done higher production pieces. And it's just a matter of who your audience is and what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, indeed. Pilot testing is a valuable part of the instructional design process. Can you share some reasons why it's so important and how it helps refine a course before the full implementation of it?
Yeah. If you don't pilot test, then you're just putting your product out there and hoping for the best. Many times that's good enough. Many times you don't need pilot testing. But I would say, especially for new populations, new content, perhaps new client, whatever, you need to pilot. And if something is a little bit more than just, okay, we're going to present the information and this is background stuff, and yeah, we'll evaluate it, but it's not like they're going to be depending on that evaluation. But then you go into this next gear, And you have to really think, what am I doing here? What is the point of this? And working through those questions. So, Denise, let me ask you the same question. What do you think about in this context?
Right. So I've been in the situation where I don't have time to pilot test something. So, for instance, with my facilitation, I develop and I facilitate particular courses within an apprenticeship style program for train the trainers. And I had to do some redesign and development work this past year. And I guess my pilot testers were the actual students because I didn't have the capacity or really the means to be able to pilot test an in-person classroom because it was just time crunch at that point. And so essentially my learners became my pilot testers, and I learned a lot from it. And I see the value in pilot testing because, gosh, I wish I could have a group of people I could rely on for particular pilot testing of these courses, because it does really help you to inform your thinking of what works, what doesn't, what's a waste of time, what would be more valuable. Those kinds of things are so crucial to engagement.
Yeah. I mean, another Chuck story, and I've told this story before, but was given the responsibility to send out a training program, 2-hour training program to every district in the United States. So every voting district, every precinct, every state, and we were training 200 people to go do this. And we did a 2-day pilot testing, which was do one and show them, do them, that kind of a format. And I'm telling you, if we wouldn't have done that, we would have sent out a product that wasn't as good as it could have been. And not everybody goes to that extreme. Not everybody has that same level of responsibility or anything else for it. But put it back into, okay, I'm going to teach an apprenticeship course to folks that are in a trainer environment. I don't have the luxury of having a group that I can try this on. But the things that you can do is you can tabletop it. And I would recommend anyone that can't do a formal pilot test that they do a tabletop. Sit there with someone else. And I say this how many times? Get someone else's eyes on your work. In a pilot test, if you can't do it formally, do a desktop. Go through your course. Just go through the way you would teach it and just sit there and do it. And things will pop out that you had never thought about. And you have someone else's eyes on this, you're going to really learn some things sometimes. Maybe you're a really good designer and it doesn't do you any good. But I think most of us, it really pays to spend that little bit of time to make sure you've gone through it at least once. And the other thing I do, if I pilot with a live audience, I tell them it's a pilot. So this is my first time to teach this. I want to hear what you think about this. Tell me where I made mistakes. Tell me where I can do better.
I love that you said that, because that is something I learned from you, and that is something that I did. And it was so helpful and so valuable. And that authenticity, I think, really helps create that synergy in a learning environment. And I think that people really felt valued, that their voice mattered in this. And I got some great feedback, both positive and I guess, constructive as well.
Well, you have to have a thick skin, but I think this goes back to the other things we've talked about, not only in the chapter chats, but elsewhere, is being authentic. Just saying I'm a human being. My products are perfect. Help me make them better, because next time I teach this to your colleagues, the people you work with, I want to do a better job. So tell me where I can do that better job. And you have to have a thick skin, because sometimes you make mistakes. And okay, yeah, I can do that better. So think about it, this whole notion of pilot testing as quality control. I keep talking about this in instructional design, but it's so true. Where are your points of quality control? Where can you look and evaluate authentically and say, this could be better?
Mm-hmm. Learning management systems are essential in distance learning. What are some of the critical tools, operations, and management elements? And what unique design challenges do they present for instructional designers?
Yeah, LMSs. This is a really big topic. I think we could do 20 or 30 videos on this. And what it does is allows you to distribute you're learning, and we're in the design phase and the development phase of ISD at this point. You're going to have a little bit in each of those phases if you use this system. But the notion is, how can I get this out there and distribute it? And the big thing that people thought about early on was the fact that it was asynchronous, that people could get anytime, any place, the whole thing. And people really love that. And so we evolved these systems. So now Blackboard and Canvas and hundreds of others, the last I saw, are out there. And what you have to do as designer is sometimes you have some choice in what you can use, most of the time you don't. I use both when I teach in higher ed. I don't have a preference for one or the other. Each has its value in one thing or a way it does another. But the whole idea is it creates an entire new level of stuff a designer has to think about. And if you've never put together a course section in one of these systems, consider yourself lucky, or however you want to look at it. But it takes time. It doubles your time that you're going to be working on this, because you have to set up all of this stuff within these shells. And you set up grading, you set up links, you set up modules, you set up all kinds of things. And then if you're going to go to a synchronous mode and actually have live sessions, then you got to build that in there. And it's really complex, and there is so much behind the scene that you have to think about those connections. So every time I set one up, and I'm working in one now, I'm working in a Blackboard shell for a graduate level course. And every time I go in there, I have to go back in and re-examine, okay, what happened to my links? What happened to my grading system? What happened to my attendance system? What happened to the ability of them to get a hold of me through this system? So it adds a whole nother level of very sophisticated design things to think about. Would I use them? I love them. I would use them all the time. And this goes back to someone, I was actually a beta tester for the early models of this. Web CT, I think, was one I did, and certainly Blackboard. I think I had Blackboard number 3 as a user or something. I mean, I've been doing this a while, thus the gray hair. But I've seen them evolve to really complicated, really sophisticated, but really powerful systems. So I like working with them. I don't mind getting in there and messing with it, because I just like the technology anyway. But if you're a new designer, you're now designing course shells and going through that whole process, it's a whole new deal. And within the chapter, there's some bullet points and things to think about as you go into it. But be optimistic about it. Be comfortable with it. Be okay with it. And I think you're going to find that these are perfect for micro-learning. You can find ways to build in informal learning. You can do that through your discussions and other things that you can do on there. And just kind of sit back and say, wow, that's pretty cool, which is what I do.
Last question for you. Massive open online courses, MOOCs, have become a popular learning format. How would you find them? And what are some of the development challenges instructional designers face when creating them?
Well, there's some great ones out there. And the thing that they've found, I don't know, this is interesting, because the completion rates on these things are abysmal. If they're 3 to 5%, that's really high. It's much lower than that. So you have 50,000 people in it, and how many actually complete it? How many actually participate as students? How many are observers? How many just plug in and watch? And I think from that perspective, if anybody can watch one and learn something, and they're terrific. When you think about it in a higher ed perspective, are you going to try to make these courses that you can apply credit to, that people can get credit for? Or do you offer them certification? You give them continuing education units, which can never be credits. That's something you need to know too. You can't do both. You get one or the other. And design-wise, they're not any more difficult than anything else you do. You just have a population of 50,000, not 15. But on the other side of it, you have to think about how you distribute it. And this goes back to what we talked about just before this notion of how can we do this electronically? And that's typically what you do. So you have the lecture or discussion or whatever, then you have materials that you can download, then you can do all these other things. And if you get into this design, get into it with the idea that okay, I'm really not sure that I'm going to be comfortable with these success rates. I'm not sure that I can think about it in the same way that I do a course. But does that mean they're not useful? Of course, they're very useful for some people. But it's been an eye opener, I think, for some of the larger institutions to see the completion rates.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chuck, for sharing your insights with this chapter chat. And thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you in the next chapter chat.